Hi wonderful people, so this topic is about line drawing. As you can see, it's a really small topic, and we get asked to sketch the graph of 4y takes 6x equals 24 and x equals -5. Now there's two ways we can do this. We can either do it using the slope and the y-intercept, so that's one way, or we can do it in a second way using the two axis intercepts. So we've got an x-intercept and a y-intercept. So you'll remember how we've talked about the slope-intercept form of an equation. That's something of the form y equals mx plus c, and when we have an equation in that form, c is the y-intercept and m is the slope. So if we want to graph a line using the slope-intercept form of an equation, we have to get the equation in slope-intercept form. And obviously 4y takes 6x equals 24 isn't, so let's rearrange that equation. We're going to rearrange that equation by going 4y equals 24 plus 6x, and then we're going to divide by 4, and so we'll get y equals 6 divided by 4x plus 24 divided by 4, which is of course 6. You can simplify 6 over 4 to be 1.5 or 3 over 2. I would leave it as a fraction, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to simplify that to 3 over 2x plus 6. Now you might find it less confusing if you actually write x as a cursive x, so that you don't confuse it with a multiplication sign. So now we have this equation in slope-intercept form, and so we can graph it. Now when you graph, just make sure generically when you graph that you always draw your axes in, you label your axes, and you put a scale. Okay, very important steps with graphing. You might want to write that down. So now let's draw our graph. So I'm just going to draw in our axes. Now you will of course use a ruler when you're doing this. Just going to do it freehand. So there is our axes being drawn in. We've got an y-axis and we've got an x-axis. Now hopefully straight off that equation you can see what the x-intercept is. The x-intercept is 6 because that's c. But before I label that, I'm just going to make sure that I put in my scale. So I'm going to go that 2 steps is 2, and it's quite enough to just label one step below the axis, one above, and then one on either side of the y-axis. So that's going to be 2, and then that's going to be 2, like that. Okay, so we've labelled our axes. So we're going to start by plotting our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is this one here, it's 6. So if that's 2, that's 4, that's going to be 6 up there. So I'm just going to plot that nice and clearly. Make sure it's nice and accurate because we will be looking. And then I'm going to use my slope. My slope is 3 over 2. Remember that slope is rise over run. So if I start at my y-intercept, I can run 2 across. So I'm going to go 2 across, and then I can go 3 up. 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you wrote your y smaller. So I go 3 up, and I'm going to put a dot there. You can do a nice precise dot. And then I'm going to join those 2 dots together. And that is the equation of that is the drawing of my line. So that's one way we do it. We do it using slope-intercept. But we can also do it using the axis intercepts, and what you would find is that you get exactly the same graph. Axis intercepts are very useful in graphing, so recall that your x-intercept is when y equals 0, so x-intercept implies y equals 0, your y-intercept implies that x equals 0. So if you have that information there, then you can just rearrange these equations in order to find the unknown. So we'll start with the x-intercept, and I'm running out of room, so you'll forgive me, but I'm just going to move over a little bit onto this side in order to be able to fit everything in. Alrighty-o. So I've got y. I'm going to first find my x-intercept. So that's when y equals 0. So I've got y equals 3 on 2x plus c, so I'm going to go 0 equals 3 on 2x plus 6, isn't it? Plus 6. I'm going to find x by taking x from both sides. -6 equals 3 on 2x times both sides by 2. -12 equals 3x. And so x is going to equal negative 4 because I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and so I'm going to get the point negative 4, 0. If you're ever asked for an x-intercept, make sure you write it as a coordinate. Don't just write it as a one single number. So if you're asked for the x-intercept, don't just write x equals negative 4. Make sure you write it as a coordinate like that. The y-intercept is often easier to find. It's just when x equals 0. So we've got y equals 3 on 2 times 0 plus 6. So of course anything times 0 is 0, so y is just going to equal 6. So therefore our y-intercept is 0, 6. Alright, so now we've got our two intercepts, so we can draw our equation using that. I'm just going to delete the other drawing I made. I'm going to cheat a little and use the same axes. So I've got my y-axis and then my x-axis. I've got the same scale going on. So now I just have to plot my points. My points are negative 4, 0. So that's going to be this point right here, negative 0.40, make sure it's accurate. And then my other one is 0, 6. So I had 0, 6 plotted anyway because of the y-intercept thing. I think my things moved a bit, so it's not quite so accurate. Let's move it again. There we go, that's better. So we can just plot 0, 6 on that line about there. And then we again join the dots. And we've got our line. Now if you line that up with the line we had before, it would be the identical line. We've just plotted two different points, but it's still the same line. So that's two different methods for drawing the lines. One is using the slope-intercept, one is using the axis intercepts. Now our final question here is plotting the graph of x equals negative 5. Don't be confused by this. If you've got x equals negative 5, that means for every single point on that line, x equals negative 5. Alright, x never changes. So what must that mean? That must mean that it's a vertical line. So if we have that's negative 5 there and that's 5 there, and again we're making sure that's negative 5 there, and that's x and that's y. If every single point on this line has an x coordinate of negative 5, that means it must be this straight line here, doesn't it? Straight line that goes straight through negative 5, like that. Okay, if it was y equals 5, it would be this line along here, because every single point on there would have the same y coordinate. Alright, I hope that helps explain how to draw lines. Have a go at doing some.